Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight, we're stepping into a hidden world. One that's around you all the time, but you probably never notice. Pollen may look like simple dust, but it is one of the greatest hidden engines of life on Earth. It moves between flowers, forests, and fields, and turns the air of spring into something golden and alive. It feeds bees, shapes harvests, and carries the future of countless plants in grains so small they can seem almost unreal. The world of pollen is surprisingly fascinating and still holds many mysteries. It can ride around the globe on atmospheric winds or across continents on the backs of bats, beetles, and bees. Some can sleep in mud for thousands of years, waiting for the precise conditions to emerge. Even now, it is all around us, floating, falling, and quietly waiting to give rise to next year's plants. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your eyes to grow heavy. And notice the day begin to gently fade away as we explore this microscopic world together. Let's begin. Pollen is the tiny dust that helps forests reproduce. Walk into a forest and it can feel eternal, as though the trees simply stand there and go on forever. But every woodland depends on a reproductive process so small it is almost invisible. That fine powder carries the male cells of seed plants, allowing new generations to begin. Without it, no pine seedlings would rise through the needles, no oak saplings would push through leaf litter, and no canopy would renew itself after storm, fire, or haze. In spring and early summer, entire forests enter this hidden season of exchange. Vast stands of trees release their grains into moving air, trusting chance, timing, and staggering numbers to do the rest. What looks like stillness is actually a great biological event unfolding overhead. Beneath the branches, the future of the forest is being written in particles so tiny that most of us never notice them at all. A single pine cone can release millions of pollen grains. It is hard to look at a pine cone and imagine abundance on that scale. It seems compact, woody, almost modest. Yet the male cones of many pines are built for astonishing output, producing grain after grain in such huge numbers that a single tree can send a yellow haze drifting through the air. The reason is simple. Wind is a careless courier. Unlike a bee, it does not aim, search, or remember. Most of what is released will never reach the right destination, so conifers rely on excess as a strategy. They flood the air because only a tiny fraction needs to succeed. During peak season, whole groves can cast visible clouds that settle on cars, ponds, windowsills, and clothes. To us, it looks messy. To the tree, it is mathematics. A towering forest places its future on the breeze, and each cone becomes part of a vast golden gamble played high among the branches. Some pollen rides the wind farther than many birds fly. Once it leaves the plant, a grain can begin a journey that feels wildly out of proportion to its size. Airborne material from trees, grasses, and weeds has been detected far from the place where it was produced, sometimes crossing coastlines, mountain gaps, and national borders. Carried by rising warm air, turbulent weather, and long-range atmospheric currents, it can drift for astonishing distances before finally settling. For the plant, this is both risk and opportunity. Most grains will be lost, but a few may reach new ground or distant relatives. For scientists, those journeys reveal how connected landscapes really are. Material from one region can appear in another, with no obvious trail except the sky itself. It is a reminder that the atmosphere is not empty space above us. It is a moving medium, full of traffic, constantly rearranging life in ways we rarely see. Tiny reproductive cells can travel farther than migration routes we usually call remarkable. Every loaf of bread begins with pollen somewhere in its story. When people think about bread, they usually picture flour, water, yeast, heat, and time. But much earlier in the chain comes a reproductive event in the grass family. Wheat, rye, and barley all depend on successful transfer before any grain can form. In cereal crops, that exchange is often handled by air rather than insects. The plants release fine material into the field and wait for it to land where it must. If that step fails, no kernel develops, and without kernels, there is no flour. So even the most ordinary slice of toast begins with a process most people never consider. Behind bakeries and breakfast tables lies a field in bloom, then a brief season when the crop is not food yet, but possibility. This makes farming feel more fragile and more wondrous at once. Our staple foods are not simply manufactured from soil. They begin with a moment of successful contact in open air. Pollen grains can survive long enough to outlast civilizations. Most living tissue is delicate. It rots, tears, fades, or vanishes under sun and rain. Yet these microscopic structures are wrapped in a wool so resilient that some remain identifiable thousands of years after the parent plant has died. The outer coating is built from sporopollenin, one of the toughest natural materials known. It resists decay, heat, drying, and chemical attack with extraordinary stubbornness. Because of that toughness, old grains can rest in lake beds, peat, caves, tombs, and ancient soils long after cities have risen and fallen above them. A kingdom may disappear. A language may vanish. A wooden house may leave almost nothing behind. But in a layer of mud, the botanical signature of that lost world can still remain. This gives the subject a strange power over time. Something so small and temporary in the air can become one of the most durable records a landscape ever leaves behind. Under a microscope, pollen looks more like sculpture than dust. To the naked eye, it seems dull and uniform, little more than powder. Magnification changes everything. Suddenly the surface becomes elaborate, almost extravagant, as if nature decided that invisibility was no reason to abandon beauty. Some grains are covered in spikes, others in ridges, pores, nets, grooves, or intricate lattices. They can resemble sea mines, carved beads, helmets, stars, or miniature cages. These forms are not decorative in a human sense. They influence how the grain travels, where it sticks, how it hydrates, and how it interacts with the receiving tissues of a plant. Even close relatives can produce distinct patterns, which is why specialists can often identify species from shape alone. This hidden architecture reveals a world most people never realize exists. Entire lineages have evolved their own microscopic signatures, each one crafted by function and history. It is one of those rare cases where science does not strip away wonder. It magnifies it. Some plants make fake pollen just to fool hungry insects. Not every flower plays fair. In some species, the structure on display is not a real reproductive reward at all, but an imitation designed to manipulate visitor behavior. These plants produce yellow or powdery-looking tissues that resemble food closely enough to attract insects that normally collect protein-rich grains. A bee lands expecting a meal, rummages around, and in the process, brushes against the true structures that matter. The insect leaves carrying what the plant wanted moved, even though the apparent reward was poor, limited, or completely deceptive. This is one of the most fascinating things about flowering plants. They do not merely sit and wait. They evolve strategies, shortcuts, and tricks. A blossom can function like a signal, a lure, even a fraud. Seen that way, a meadow is not just beautiful. It is full of persuasion. Color, shape, texture, and timing all become tools in a contest for the attention of passing animals. Scientists can identify ancient landscapes from pollen buried underground. A core pulled from mud may look unimpressive, just a dark cylinder of layered sediment. Yet within those layers lies a chronological record of changing vegetation. Year after year, material falls into lakes, bogs, and wetlands, then gets sealed away. By slicing through those deposits and examining the grains preserved inside, researchers can reconstruct what once grew nearby. A rise in grass types may suggest open land. A surge in cereal grains may point to farming. Tree pollen can reveal advancing forests, retreating woodlands, or shifts caused by climate. With enough samples, whole lost environments begin to reappear. A place that is meadow today may once have been pine forest, then marsh, then cultivated field. This makes the ground beneath us feel almost like memory given physical form. The past does not vanish completely. It settles, accumulates, and waits. In buried layers no wider than a hand, entire vanished worlds can still be read. Pollen is the male part of a seed plant's journey. To understand why this powder matters, it helps to see what role it plays in the larger story. In seed plants, reproduction is divided. One structure makes ovules, which can become seeds after fertilization. Another makes the microscopic carriers that deliver the male cells needed to begin that transformation. That is what this material is doing. It is not decoration, and it is not waste. It is one half of a deeply successful system that allowed seed plants to spread across the world. Once that connection happens, a new plant can begin in protected form, wrapped inside a seed with food stored for the first stage of growth. That was an evolutionary breakthrough. It meant plants no longer had to leave their future exposed. So when a flower opens or a comb ripens, what you are really seeing is not beauty alone. You are seeing one side of a partnership designed to build the next generation. Bees can carry pollen from flower to flower like living couriers. A bee does not visit a blossom out of kindness. It comes looking for food, for nectar to fuel flight, or protein-rich grains to feed the young back in the nest. But in moving from one flower to the next, it becomes one of the most effective transport systems in the natural world. Its body is perfect for the job. Hairs branch and trap loose particles. Legs sweep them inward. Static electricity helps them cling. As the insect pushes into one bloom after another, some of that cargo rubs off exactly where the plant needs it. This is not a random meeting. Many flowers are shaped around the bodies and habits of their best visitors. Some place their reproductive parts where a bee's back must brush past. Others only open fully at the right moment of day. What seems like a casual garden visit is actually a tightly choreographed exchange that keeps orchards, meadows, and wild landscapes alive. The air can hold entire invisible clouds of drifting pollen. There are days when sunlight reveals it for a moment, turning a slant of air golden, but most of the time the atmosphere hides what it carries. During peak release, huge quantities can remain suspended above streets, fields, lakes, and forests without any obvious sign. We walk through those suspended masses unaware, breathing, driving, opening windows, watching weather move through a sky that contains an unseen biological event. On windy days, the concentration can become extraordinary. On calm days, it can settle slowly over every surface. This changes the way you think about air itself. It is not empty. It is a transport system filled with spores, salts, dust, droplets, microbes, and at certain times of year, reproductive material from the surrounding plant world. In effect, landscapes do not end at the ground. They extend upward into moving space. Meadows and forests are always shedding something of themselves into the atmosphere above our heads. Flowering plants and conifers both make pollen, but very differently. At first glance, a rose and a pine seem to belong to separate worlds. One is soft, bright, and short-lived. The other is woody, resinous, and built for long seasons. Yet both rely on the same basic reproductive idea. They just organize it in very different ways. Flowering plants often hide the crucial structures inside blossoms that attract animals with color, scent, shape, or reward. Conifers take another route. They build cones, release vast quantities into open air, and depend on seasonal timing rather than animal attention. That difference changes the whole look and feel of a landscape. A meadow in bloom is full of signals directed outward toward pollinators. A pine forest in season may appear almost unchanged until the yellow dust begins to fall. One system invests in persuasion. The other invests in scale and exposure. Both are ancient, both are effective, and together they show how many ways life can solve the same problem. Each pollen grain carries cells needed for plant reproduction. It may look like a speck of dust, but inside is a tiny living package with a serious task. This is not empty powder. It contains the cells that will eventually contribute the male genetic material needed for fertilization. In flowering plants, one cell will guide the growth process after landing, while others are involved in the final union that helps form both the embryo and its food supply. That means each grain is less like debris and more like a compact biological capsule, already prepared for the next stage if conditions are right. It must stay viable during travel, survive drying, and respond fast when it reaches a compatible surface. All of that is packed into something small enough to disappear on a fingertip. The scale is astonishing. A forest, field, or garden can release countless living units, each one carrying not a finished plant, but the cellular potential that allows the plant's future to begin. Pollen is not the same thing as a seed. People often blur the two together because both are linked to plant reproduction, but they are very different stages in the story. One is a delivery system for male cells. The other is the result of successful fertilization, a new organism packaged with protection and stored food. That distinction matters because it shows just how much must happen before a future plant exists in usable form. A grain cannot grow into a tree or sunflower on its own. It must first reach the right place, interact with the female tissues of the plant, and help trigger the process that produces an embryo. Only then can a seed form. In other words, one is possibility in transit, and the other is possibility secured. That is why a field can release huge amounts into the air without instantly becoming a field of new plants. First comes transfer. Later, if all goes well, comes the protected beginning we recognize as a seed. Mosses and ferns spread by spores, not by pollen. This is where plant history gets especially fascinating, because not all green life solved reproduction in the same way. Mosses and ferns belong to older lineages that do not make seeds at all. Instead, they release spores, which are single reproductive cells capable of growing into a new stage of the life cycle without first combining in the same way seed plants do. That gives these groups a very different rhythm. Ferns often scatter spores from structures under their fronds. Mosses release them from capsules that rise on slender stalks. In both cases, water still plays an important role later in the process, which hints at their ancient ancestry and their close ties to damper habitats. Seed plants broke away from that dependence and developed a more protected system. So when you compare a fern-filled ravine with a flowering meadow, you are not just seeing different plants. You are seeing two major reproductive strategies from different chapters of land-plant evolution. Many plants trust insects more than the wind with pollen. For a plant, wind is cheap, but it is wildly inefficient. It blows everywhere, wastes most of what is released, and offers no guarantee of reaching the right target. Insects are different. They can move with direction, revisit the same kind of flower, and carry material straight into the reproductive zone with remarkable accuracy. That is why so many plants have evolved to recruit them. Once this partnership began, flowers could become more precise, more economical, and more specialized. Instead of flooding the air, a plant could produce less and place it exactly where a visiting insect would pick it up. In return, the insect gained food. Over time, this relationship shaped some of the most familiar sights in the natural world, from the architecture of blossoms to the seasonal traffic of bees, beetles, flies, moths, and butterflies. A pollinated flower is not simply visited. It is part of a long alliance between plants and animals, built on repeated trust. Grasses release huge amounts of pollen without making showy flowers. If you walked through a field of grasses without knowing their importance, you might think they were understated plants compared with roses, foxgloves, or orchids. Their flowers are small, often greenish, and easy to miss. That is because they are not trying to attract attention. They do not need petals like landing lights or perfumes to draw animals in. Instead, they rely on open exposure and huge output. Their reproductive parts hang into moving air, ready to shed or catch what passes through. This strategy helped grasses become one of the most successful plant groups on Earth. They dominate prairies, savannas, steppes, lawns, marshes, and cereal fields. They feed grazing animals, stabilize soils, and support human civilization through grains such as rice, wheat, and maize. Yet their reproductive display is almost invisible. That contrast is part of the wonder. Some of the most powerful plants on the planet do not bloom dramatically. They simply release abundance and let the air do the work. Pine pollen often coats lakes in yellow, floating slicks. In the right season, a quiet lake in a conifer-rich landscape can look as though someone has poured paint across its surface. Yellow film gathers in corners, along shorelines, and in curving streaks that trace the movement of wind and water. People sometimes mistake it for pollution, oil, or chemical residue, but often it is simply the output of nearby pines settling onto the water. The sight can be startling because it turns an invisible process into something suddenly undeniable. You can see the scale of release all at once. Each floating band is evidence of trees reproducing on a massive timetable larger than any single branch or cone. Water makes that visible by collecting what the air has been carrying. It is a brief, natural phenomenon, but a memorable one. A calm pond becomes a map of spring in motion, showing where the forest has cast its fine yellow signal and where the landscape has begun to gather it. Corn depends on airborne pollen, not bees, to reproduce. Cornfields may seem agricultural and controlled, but their reproduction still depends on a moment of physical transfer that happens out in open air. Each plant separates its male and female structures. At the top is the tassel, which releases the grains. Lower down are the developing ears, with silks extending outward. Each silk connects to a single future kernel. For a full ear to form, grains must land on those silks one by one. That means every missing contact can leave an empty gap on the cob. The process is elegant, but also vulnerable. Heat, drought, poor timing, or weak release can reduce success. When conditions are right, though, an entire field becomes a coordinated event, with billions of particles moving through the rows and settling onto waiting threads. It is easy to think of corn as a product because we meet it in markets and meals. In the field, it is something else first. It is a towering grass depending on the wind. Wheat fields release pollen even when almost nobody notices. There is something fascinating about how much can be happening in a field that appears completely still. Wheat does not announce itself with colorful blossoms or obvious visitors. Its flowering is subtle, brief, and easy to miss, unless you know when to look. Yet during that narrow window, each head enters a critical stage in which tiny structures emerge, release their reproductive material, and make grain formation possible. Farmers care deeply about this timing because success here shapes yield later. But most people walking past a field would never guess what is underway. That hiddenness gives wheat a different kind of drama. The future loaf, the pasta, the biscuit, the breakfast cereal all depend on a process almost too quiet to see. A landscape of pale stems moving in the breeze can contain one of the most important reproductive events in human food production. It does not need spectacle. Its significance lies in how much the world depends on it happening well. Some flowers can recognize whether pollen came from themselves. At first, that sounds almost impossible. Recognition feels like something animals do, not blossoms rooted in place. Yet many flowering plants can detect whether what lands on them came from the same individual or from another plant. This happens through molecular signals on the surface of the grain and inside the receiving tissues. When the match suggests self-origin, the flower may slow the process, block it, or prevent it from going any further. If the material came from a different individual of the same species, the pathway can remain open. It is a remarkable form of biological discrimination happening without eyes, nerves, or thought. The flower is not passive at all. It is screening incoming material and judging compatibility at a microscopic level. Hidden inside a bloom is a system of identity checking, as precise in its own way as a lock meeting the wrong key. That unseen test shapes which futures are allowed to begin. Many plants reject their own pollen to avoid inbreeding. For a plant, self-reproduction can seem convenient. If your own grains can reach your own stigma, then reproduction looks almost guaranteed. But there is a long-term cost. Too much selfing narrows genetic variety and can leave future generations less resilient in the face of disease, drought, pests, or changing conditions. So many species evolved ways to refuse what came from themselves. In some, the stigma detects certain matching proteins and shuts the process down immediately. In others, growth begins, then fails deeper inside the flower. This may seem ruthless, but it is really an investment in stronger offspring. By favoring material from another individual, the plant mixes different gene combinations and increases the odds that the next generation can handle an unpredictable world. That means even a stationary organism is playing a deep evolutionary game. It is not simply reproducing. It is choosing diversity over convenience and resilience over certainty. A pollen grain can grow a tube into a flower. Once a compatible grain lands on the right surface, the story changes completely. What looked like a dry speck suddenly becomes active. It hydrates, wakes, and begins extending a microscopic tube downward from its wall. This is one of the most extraordinary moments in plant reproduction because the grain does not need to move as a whole. Instead, it sends a growing structure into the tissues of the flower like a living thread. That tube is the route by which the male cells will travel. It pushes forward through secretions and cell layers, responding to chemical guidance from the tissues ahead. In effect, the plant has turned a particle into an explorer. The journey is invisible to us, but it is one of the key reasons flowering plants are so successful. A tiny grain arrives from the outside, then begins constructing its own path inward, converting contact on the surface into a deep internal process that can change the flower forever. That pollen tube can race deep into hidden tissues. The speed of this process is one of the great surprises of botany. Once growth begins, the tube does not wander aimlessly. It advances through the style with direction, guided by signals that lead it toward the ovule. In some species, that journey can be completed astonishingly fast relative to the scale involved. Imagine a living filament growing through a biological corridor, responding to gradients, avoiding error, and delivering its cargo to a target buried from view. It is a microscopic race, and in flowers with multiple grains arriving, there can be real competition over which tube reaches first. That gives the process energy and tension we rarely associate with plants. What looks still from the outside can contain movement, guidance, and biological urgency within. A flower may seem like a resting thing in sunlight, but inside it, thin cellular pathways can be extending with purpose toward one of the most important destinations in the plant's entire life. Fertilization in flowers begins long before any fruit appears. When people see an apple, a tomato, or a bean pod, they are looking at a later chapter of a story that started much earlier inside the flower. Long before a fruit swells, changes color, or sweetens, the decisive event is already underway. Successful transfer has to happen first, then tube growth, then the union of reproductive cells inside the ovule. Only after that can seeds begin to form, and only then do surrounding tissues start developing into what we recognize as fruit. This delay matters because it changes how we think about orchards and gardens. The harvest is not born when the fruit becomes visible. It begins during a hidden interval when blossoms are still fresh or already falling. That is the moment the future is decided. A tree in bloom is not merely decorative. It is standing in a narrow window where unseen success will later become visible abundance, months after the crucial work is already done. Orchids package pollen into waxy bundles called pollinia. Most flowers release loose grains that dust a visitor or drift into air, but orchids often take a very different approach. Instead of letting countless separate particles scatter, many species gather them into compact masses called pollinia. These waxy bundles can be lifted and carried as a single unit, almost like a parcel prepared for delivery. This changes the whole strategy of pollination. The orchid is not hoping for a little accidental dusting. It is aiming for direct transfer, with one visitor moving a concentrated package from one flower to another. That makes the process feel less like shedding and more like engineering. Each visit can become high stakes. If the package is placed correctly, a large amount can reach the next flower at once. It is one of the reasons orchids seem so intricate and so strange. They have turned reproduction into a precision system, replacing clouds of particles with carefully assembled biological cargo. Some orchids glue pollen onto insects with remarkable precision. An orchid visit can be one of the most exacting interactions in the plant world. In certain species, when an insect enters the flower in search of scent, nectar, or even a mistaken mating opportunity, it triggers a mechanism that sticks the reproductive package onto a very specific part of the body. Not just anywhere, but often the head, eyes, back, or abdomen, depending on how that insect moves and how the next flower is shaped. The placement has to be exact, because the same insect must later touch the receiving surface in just the right way. Some orchids even position the package so that it shifts angle after attachment, improving the odds of proper contact at the next bloom. This is floral design at an astonishing level of refinement. The insect thinks it is foraging. the flower is conducting an exact transfer operation. One misalignment and the whole plan fails. One perfect placement and the system works beautifully. Milkweed hides its pollen in saddlebag-like packets for insects. Milkweed does not simply dust passing insects and hope for the best. Instead, it stores its reproductive material in paired packets connected by a tiny central structure. When a bee or butterfly probes the flower, a leg can slip into a narrow gap and catch that connector. As the insect pulls free, the paired packets come with it, hanging like tiny saddlebags from the leg. The image is extraordinary once you know to look for it. A visiting insect leaves not dusted, but equipped. Those packets can then be carried to another flower, where they may be inserted into the right slot and complete the transfer. It is an elegant but risky system. If the insect struggles, the packets may be lost. If the fit is right, the flower has achieved directed transport with astonishing efficiency. Milkweed turns pollination into a mechanical interaction, with hooks, catches, and detachable cargo built into each small bloom. Grains of pollen come in shapes unique to species. This is one of the reasons the subject becomes so captivating under magnification. What seems generic from a distance turns out to be highly distinctive up close. Different species often produce grains with their own characteristic forms, including the number of openings, the arrangement of surface patterns, the outline, and the thickness of the wall. Those features are so consistent that trained specialists can often identify the parent plant from the grain alone, even when no leaves, flowers, or seeds are present. It is like discovering that every species leaves behind its own microscopic signature. That has enormous value in ecology, archaeology, geology, and forensic science, because it means a tiny preserved grain can reveal what once grew in a place, or what an object passed through. The astonishing part is not only that the difference exists, but that it exists at such a fine scale. Entire lineages announce themselves in forms too small for ordinary sight. Some pollen grains are spiky, while others are smooth. These textures are not random decoration. They can influence how a grain behaves in the world, how it catches on an animal, how it moves through air, how it interacts with moisture, and how it makes contact with the receiving surfaces of a flower. A spiny grain may cling more effectively to fur or insect hairs, turning an animal into a reliable transport partner. A smoother one may suit other roots and other kinds of transfer. Under magnification, the contrast is startling. One species may look armed, rough, and dramatic, while another appears polished and almost simple. Yet both forms have been shaped by long evolutionary history. This is where the invisible world becomes almost theatrical. Texture, contour, and structure all matter, even though they unfold beyond normal human vision. The next time a flower opens, there may be grains inside that resemble miniature weapons or perfect beads, each form tuned to the demands of its own reproductive journey. Pollen walls are built from one of nature's toughest materials. What makes this tiny structure so astonishing is not only what it does, but what it is made of. The outer wall is fortified with a substance so durable that it resists chemical attack, heat, decay, and the ordinary breakdown that destroys most living tissues. That toughness is not a luxury. A grain may be blasted by ultraviolet light, dried by wind, jostled through transport, or stranded for a time before it ever reaches a target. Its outer shell has to endure all of that while protecting the living contents inside. Under a microscope, the wall can appear delicate and ornate, yet it functions more like armor. It is one of the reasons these structures are so useful to science. Their protective coat lets them survive circumstances that would erase softer biological evidence completely. In a sense, each grain travels inside its own fortress, built not for battle, but for survival during one of the most vulnerable journeys in plant life. Sporopollenin helps pollen survive sunlight, drought, and deep time. This remarkable substance is one of the hidden marvels of biology. Plants use it to build a protective layer around the outside, and that layer performs a task that feels almost superhuman in its toughness. It helps shield the grain from intense sunlight, including the damaging ultraviolet radiation that can wreck delicate cells. It also resists drying, which matters enormously when travel happens through open air or across exposed surfaces. But what makes it truly extraordinary is what happens long after the plant itself is gone. This same protective chemistry can preserve form across centuries, sometimes across far longer stretches of time. Whole landscapes vanish. Leaves rot. Wood collapses. Petals disappear without a trace. Yet this stubborn outer layer can remain, carrying the identity of the parent plant into the future like a sealed message. It is rare to find a material that serves both immediate survival and long memory. Yet that is exactly what this one does. Ancient pollen can remain recognizable after thousands of years underground. Imagine a grain settling into wet soil while bronze tools still gleam, while languages not yet written are being spoken, while the future of whole civilizations remains unwritten. Then imagine that same grain being recovered today, still identifiable under a microscope. That is the scale of endurance involved here. When conditions are right, burial can protect these microscopic structures so effectively that their shapes remain readable across immense spans of time. The parent flower or tree may be long gone. The landscape may have changed beyond recognition. Yet specialists can still examine the preserved grain and determine what kind of plant once grew there. This turns underground sediments into archives of astonishing intimacy. The past does not survive only through monuments and bones. Sometimes it survives through botanical particles so small they could sit unnoticed on a fingertip. That reversal is part of the wonder. Tiny things, not massive ones, can become some of the most reliable witnesses to vanished worlds. Lake mud can preserve pollen like a quiet botanical archive. A lake seems peaceful from above, but below the surface it is constantly collecting evidence. Year after year, material settles downward in thin layers, including mineral particles, bits of algae, fragments of plants, and microscopic reproductive grains from the surrounding landscape. Once buried in the low-oxygen mud, those grains can remain protected and undisturbed for long periods. This gives scientists something extraordinary, a layered history of what once grew around the water's edge and far beyond it. By taking a sediment core and reading down through the layers, researchers can move backward through time, watching plant communities shift as climates changed, shorelines moved, or human land use transformed the area. The lake becomes a patient recorder that never intended to keep records, yet does so faithfully. It stores evidence season by season, then century by century. What looks like ordinary mud is often a chronological library, holding a botanical history no human ever set out to write. Peat bogs hold pollen records stretching back through ice ages. Bogs are among the most powerful natural time capsules on Earth. Their waterlogged, acidic conditions slow decay so effectively that delicate organic remains can persist far longer than they would in ordinary soil. Layer by layer, mosses grow, die, and compress into peat, trapping whatever drifts into them from the surrounding world. That includes microscopic grains from trees, grasses, herbs, and crops. Over thousands of years, those trapped layers can build into a deep vertical time mine. Scientists cut into that dark, sponge-like mass and recover a sequence that reaches back through dramatic climate swings, including periods when glaciers advanced and retreated across large parts of the planet. In those layers, the botanical world rises and falls. Cold-adapted plants expand. forests return. Open tundra gives way to woodland. It is difficult not to be amazed by this. A wet, silent bog can preserve a record of changing worlds that began before many modern landscapes had even taken their present shape. Fossil pollen helps scientists track vanished forests and changing climates. When forests disappear, we often assume their story is gone with them. Trees fall, wood decays, roots rot away, and in time the land may look completely different. Yet microscopic evidence can remain behind, allowing researchers to reconstruct what once stood there. By studying preserved grains in sediments, scientists can tell whether a region was dominated by pine, oak, birch, grasses, heath, or other plant communities. As those proportions change through time, they reveal broader shifts in temperature, moisture, seasonality, and ecological stability. A warming climate may allow one forest type to spread. Cooling may favor another. In this way, tiny preserved structures become climate witnesses. They do not tell us the weather on a single day, but they reveal long environmental trends with remarkable clarity. It is one of the most beautiful examples of scale in science. Vast changes in forests and climate can be traced through evidence so small that human sight alone could never read it. Pollen can reveal when farming first spread across a region. One of the great questions in human history is when people stopped living only from wild landscapes and began reshaping the land for crops. Sometimes the answer comes not from tools or buildings, but from microscopic plant evidence buried in sediments. When agriculture spreads into a region, the local botanical signal changes. Wild woodland types may decline as trees are cleared. Disturbance-loving weeds begin to appear. Most importantly, grains from cultivated cereals can enter the record. That shift can mark the arrival of farming communities with startling precision. It means that long after fields vanish and houses collapse, the transformed plant signature of agriculture may still remain below ground. In some cases, this evidence shows that farming arrived earlier or spread differently than archaeologists once thought. That is what makes it so compelling. A new way of life, one that changed diets, societies, and landscapes forever, can first become visible through tiny preserved traces of crops moving into the sedimentary record. Archaeologists use pollen to reconstruct gardens, fields, and diets. At an excavation site, the obvious finds often take attention first. Pottery, tools, walls, bones, and ornaments seem to tell the main story. Yet some of the most intimate details of daily life come from microscopic plant evidence recovered from soils, storage pits, vessels, hearth residues, and even ancient latrines. Those tiny traces can help archaeologists infer what kinds of plants were growing nearby, what people cultivated, what they gathered, and what may have been eaten or processed at a site. A palace garden, a monastery plot, a kitchen area, and a farming settlement can all leave different botanical signatures behind. In some cases, the evidence suggests medicinal herbs, fruit cultivation, grain handling, or ritual plant use. Suddenly, the past becomes less architectural and more alive. You can begin to imagine the scents, colors, and routines of a place. Tiny grains help restore not just the structure of an ancient site, but the living landscape around it. Pollen on mummies has helped identify ancient burial practices. When a body is preserved, it carries more than flesh and wrappings into the future. Sometimes it also carries microscopic traces of the plants present at burial. Those traces can reveal whether flowers were placed around the dead, whether specific herbs were used in preparation, or whether the body was moved through a particular season or landscape before final burial. In famous cases, microscopic botanical evidence has helped researchers argue that certain ancient burials included deliberate floral offerings rather than random contamination. That changes the emotional tone of archaeology. A burial stops being only an object of study and becomes a moment of human care, ritual, memory, and intention. Even where the visible flowers have long since vanished, the microscopic record may remain. That is part of what makes this field so moving. Tiny preserved grains can testify to acts of mourning performed thousands of years ago, allowing gestures of farewell to survive when nearly everything else has faded. Crime investigators sometimes use pollen as silent trace evidence. Because these grains are so small, so abundant, and so varied by place and season, they can travel unnoticed on clothing, shoes, bags, vehicles, or other objects. That makes them useful in forensic work. A suspect may wash mud away and remove obvious debris, yet microscopic plant traces can still remain caught in fabric, trapped in tire treads, or lodged in seams. If investigators recover and identify those grains, they may be able to link an object or person to a particular habitat, region, or route. A coastal marsh leaves a different botanical signature than a pine forest, a city park, or an agricultural field. Used carefully, that evidence can support a timeline or narrow a location. It rarely solves a case alone, but it can strengthen a picture built from other clues. There is something almost eerie about that. A landscape can cling to someone invisibly, and the plant world may end up speaking in court without ever making a sound. Pollen can cling to shoes, clothes, and moving vehicles. One of the strangest things about this material is how easily it travels with us without permission or notice. A walk through a meadow, a shortcut across a field, a drive down a country lane in spring, and suddenly the outside world is riding along. Tiny grains catching boot treads settle into trouser hems, cling to fabric fibers, and lodge in the dusty seams of cars, bicycles, and farm machinery. Because different landscapes produce different mixtures, what sticks can act like a faint botanical signature of where something has been. A single trip can gather traces from hedgerows, roadside grasses, woodland edges, and crop fields, layering one place over another. This makes movement feel different. We tend to think of travel as something people and machines do alone. In reality, landscapes come with us. The plant world sheds microscopic evidence everywhere, and much of it goes hitchhiking unnoticed on the surfaces we carry through the day. A few grains can place an object in a landscape. That sounds almost impossible at first, because a landscape feels huge and a grain feels absurdly small. Yet that contrast is exactly what gives this evidence its power. A particular place often produces a distinctive combination of species at a particular season, and those species shed microscopic traces into the local environment. If some of those traces settle onto an object, they can help narrow down where that object has been. Not always to a single square yard, but often to a habitat, route, or kind of setting. A marsh leaves one signature. A conifer wood leaves another. A field margin rich in weeds and flowering herbs leaves a different one again. This is why a small sample can matter so much. It is not about one grain in isolation. It is about the pattern created by several, each acting like part of a coded message. A place can be read through what it quietly leaves behind. Honey contains pollen that reveals which flowers bees visited. A jar of honey may look simple, golden, smooth, and sealed, but inside it, there can be a hidden record of a bee's foraging world. As bees gather nectar from blossoms, microscopic grains from those same plants often end up mixed into the final product. That means the honey can carry botanical clues about where the bees were working and what kinds of flowers were in bloom when it was made. Under the microscope, those traces become a map of a season. Orange blossom honey, chestnut honey, heather honey, and wildflower honey can each carry different signatures depending on the plants visited and the landscape surrounding the hive. In that sense, Honey is not only food, it is also a compressed floral memory. A spoonful can contain evidence of orchards, moorland, woodland edges, hedgerows, or mountain herbs, all gathered by insects that spent their days moving through a living mosaic of bloom. Pollen analysis can expose fake honey and misleading labels. Labels can promise all sorts of romance. Wild mountain flowers, pure lavender fields, orange groves in bloom. But microscopic plant evidence can test whether those claims match the contents of the jar. If a honey is sold as coming mainly from one flower type, analysts can examine the grains inside and see whether the botanical profile supports that story. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it clearly does not. A product sold as a prized single-flower honey may turn out to contain a very different mix, suggesting another origin, heavy blending, or misleading marketing. In some cases, the evidence can even point toward a different region than the one named on the label. That gives this field a surprising role in food authenticity. The microscope becomes a truth teller. What bees actually visited matters more than what packaging suggests. It is a beautiful idea in a way. The flower sources leave traces that survive the journey into the jar, and those traces can still speak. Some people eat bee-collected pollen as a food product. Long before most people saw it on health shop shelves, bees were already gathering it with extraordinary dedication. Foragers brush grains from their bodies, mix them with nectar or saliva, and compress the load into pellets for the journey home. Humans sometimes collect those pellets from hive entrances and sell them as a food product, often praising them for their dense mix of proteins, lipids, vitamins, pigments, and plant compounds. The result looks surprisingly vivid, with little granules in yellows, oranges, browns, and purples depending on the source flowers. There is something fascinating about that transformation. What began as microscopic reproductive material becomes something visible, handled, sorted, eaten, and marketed. It shifts from invisible ecology into human culture. Of course, to the bees, it was never a supplement or a trend. It was essential brood food, gathered with immense labor. That contrast makes the product feel more interesting. Each pellet is the result of repeated visits to many blossoms. Bee pollen is different from the pollen drifting in air. The phrase can be misleading because it sounds as though it refers to a special type made by bees. In reality, the difference comes from what the insects do to it. The grains floating freely outdoors are loose, dry, and still in the form released by the plant. What bees carry back is something they have actively gathered, moistened, and packed into manageable pellets. That changes its texture, appearance, and behavior completely. Instead of drifting as powder, it becomes a compact little load attached to the insect's legs. It also tends to come mainly from flowers the bees intentionally worked, rather than from the wind-dispersed sources that dominate open air at certain times of year. So when people hear the term, they are really hearing about processed cargo, not a separate botanical category. The bee has turned loose microscopic particles into visible harvest bundles. That act of collection makes an airborne plant product into something shaped by animal labor. Bees pack pollen into baskets on their hind legs. A bee returning to the hive can look as though it is wearing bright saddlebags. Those colored lumps on the hind legs are not decoration. They are carefully packed loads gathered during repeated visits to flowers. Many social bees have specialized structures called corbiculae, often described as baskets, ordered by stiff hairs that help hold the cargo in place. During foraging, the bee uses its legs like tools, combing grains from the body, moistening them, compressing them, and tucking them into those carrying spaces until each load is secure. The colors can vary dramatically depending on the plants visited, from pale cream to deep orange, or even almost red. that makes a returning worker look like a tiny collector carrying parcels from another world. It is one of the great sights of close observation. What seems like a small insect at work is actually performing harvest, grooming, packing, and transport all at once, with astonishing efficiency on the wing. Bumblebees can shake pollen loose with a buzzing vibration. Some flowers do not give up their grains easily. Instead of presenting them openly, they keep them tucked inside tube-like anthers with only tiny openings. A bumblebee can solve that problem with force and finesse together. It grips the flower, disengages its wings from flight, and vibrates the muscles of the thorax at high frequency. The sound is familiar, but the purpose is extraordinary. Those vibrations travel into the flower and shake the grains free like powder from a salt shaker. A visible cloud can burst out onto the bee's body, ready to be collected or carried onward. This behavior is often called buzz pollination, and it turns the bee into something very close to a living tuning fork. It is not just visiting a flower, it is operating it. That changes the whole image of pollination. The insect is not a passive messenger brushing past by chance. It is actively unlocking a floral mechanism with precisely the right physical trick. Some flowers only release pollen when bees buzz them. These blossoms keep their grains hidden in a way that almost feels selective. The anthers are shaped so that the reproductive material stays trapped unless the flower experiences the right kind of vibration. Wind is not enough. A casual touch is not enough. A general insect crawl may not do it. What is needed is the specific buzzing action produced by certain bees using their flight muscles in a special way. Only then do the grains pour out through small openings. It is a remarkably demanding arrangement, and it means the plant is not open to every visitor equally. Instead, it is effectively choosing a delivery service with the right equipment. That adds a sense of exclusivity to the relationship. The flower does not simply exist to be visited. It is tuned to a particular mechanical language. If the correct bee arrives, the system works beautifully. If not, the reward stays locked away inside, waiting for the right vibration. Tomatoes and blueberries rely on that vibrating bee technique. It is easy to forget that familiar foods often depend on behaviors as specialized as anything in a rainforest. Tomato and blueberry flowers both benefit greatly from bees that can perform that vibrating trick, because their grains are held in a way that responds best to buzzing rather than simple contact. In commercial growing systems, this matters enormously. Bumblebees are often used in greenhouses for tomatoes because they can do the job with speed and consistency, moving from flower to flower and releasing what the plants are holding back. Blueberries in open fields also came from bee species able to work the blossoms effectively. Without that help, fruit set can be poorer and harvests can suffer. So behind pasta sauce, salads, muffins, pancakes, and jam lies a hidden acoustic event. Tiny muscles tremble, flowers release, and crops begin their journey toward the table. It is one of the most delightful truths in agriculture. Food can begin with a buzz. Some plants offer pollen, not nectar, as the prize. Not every flower lures visitors with sweetness. Some skip nectar entirely and instead offer the grains themselves as food. To an insect, that can be a rich reward, packed with protein and other nutrients needed for growth and reproduction. This changes the whole mood of the interaction. The visitor is not sipping fuel from a hidden well. It is harvesting a tangible food source from the flower's reproductive parts. That may sound risky for the plant, but the arrangement can work beautifully. As the insect gathers the edible reward, it becomes dusted and carries some away to the next bloom. In effect, the flower is paying in the very material it needs moved. Certain poppies, anemones, and many other species use this strategy. It reveals a striking truth about plant evolution. A flower does not need to be generous in every possible way. It only needs to offer the right kind of incentive to the right visitor at the right moment. Other flowers tempt insects with scent while hiding the reward. Some blossoms advertise boldly with color. Others rely on fragrance, drawing insects in with signals that travel through the air long before the flower is seen. The scent can suggest food, a mate, or even a suitable place to lay eggs. But arrival does not always bring an obvious reward. In some species, the visitor must crawl deep into the bloom, navigate narrow passages, or probe around hidden structures before finding anything useful. In others, the promise is stronger than the payout. What matters is that the insect stays long enough and moves in the right way. That transforms the flower into something closer to a puzzle than a simple feeding station. Smell becomes the invitation, and architecture controls what happens next. There is something wonderfully sly about that. The insect follows an invisible trail through the air, reaches the source, and finds itself inside a carefully designed space where the plant controls the terms of the encounter. A few flowers make pollen that nourishes beetles for hours. Beetle-pollinated flowers often play a different game from the fast, precise visits of bees. Instead of encouraging a quick stop and departure, some provide abundant food and a sheltered place where the insects can remain for long stretches. In these flowers, the grains are not just transferred in passing. They are part of a feast. Beetles arrive, feed heavily, crawl over the reproductive structures, and stay among the petals while more material gathers on their bodies. Magnolias, water lilies, and certain ancient-looking blossoms are famous for these slower interactions. The relationship can feel almost prehistoric, which is fitting, because beetles are among the oldest pollinators of flowering plants. A single bloom may become a dining room, shelter, and meeting place all at once. That gives the process an unusual richness. Instead of a brief exchange, the flower hosts an extended visit, and the beetles leave carrying evidence of a long meal written across their bodies. Some insects eat pollen, then accidentally pollinate the next flower. It is one of nature's most elegant side effects. An insect arrives intending to feed, not to help the plant. It scrapes, chews, brushes, or combs edible grains from the flower and packs them into mouthparts, hairs, or body grooves. Then it moves on. But complete cleanup is almost impossible. Some of what it gathered remains stuck to the body, and when the insect lands on another flower of the same kind, those leftover particles may make the vital contact the plant needs. That means successful reproduction can emerge from appetite rather than cooperation. The insect is pursuing its own survival. The flower benefits from what the feeding leaves behind. This gives pollination a wonderfully unsentimental beauty. It does not require planning, gratitude, or partnership in any human sense. It only requires repeated contact shaped by evolution. The next time an insect seems to be stealing from a flower, it may also be delivering the very thing that keeps the species going. Pollen feeds young bees with protein, fats, and minerals. Honey often gets the attention, but for a developing bee, sweet liquid is not enough. Larvae need building materials, not just energy, and that is where the collected grains become essential. Worker bees gather them, mix them, store them, and turn them into brood food that supports growth inside the hive. This food provides protein for tissues, fats for development, and mineral nutrients needed for healthy bodies to form. Without that supply, the colony cannot raise the next generation properly. In that sense, a flowering landscape is not simply a feeding ground for adult bees. It is the pantry for the nursery. Meadows, orchards, hedgerows, and wild patches all become part of the colony's hidden supply chain. This makes bloom diversity especially important because different plants offer different nutritional profiles. A hive surrounded by rich floral variety is gathering the raw materials of future workers. Inside each returning forager's load is the substance of the colony's tomorrow. Without pollen, many bee larvae could never fully develop. Inside the hive, young bees depend entirely on what the workers can gather and prepare for them. Eggs hatch into larvae that grow at extraordinary speed, and that growth demands a steady supply of nutrient-rich food. Sweet stores provide energy, but they cannot do the whole job. The developing body needs amino acids, lipids, and micronutrients to build muscles, glands, organs, and all the structures of an adult bee. If those essentials are missing or poor in quality, development can be weakened, slowed, or incomplete. This is why periods of floral shortage can become so dangerous for colonies even when some sugar remains available. The nursery may still be hungry in a deeper way. What looks like a healthy landscape to us can be nutritionally thin if it lacks the right kinds of flowering plants. So the fate of the next generation may depend on something as simple and profound as whether enough suitable blossoms are open within flying distance. Some bats leave flowers dusted in pollen after night feeding. When darkness falls, the pollination story does not end. In some regions, it simply changes wings. Nectar-feeding bats visit flowers that open or become most active at night, often pale blooms with strong scents that are easier to detect in the dark. As the bat hovers or clambers in to feed, its muzzle, forehead, and fur brush against the flower's reproductive parts. By the time it pulls away, it may be carrying a visible dusting. On the next visit, some of that cargo can be transferred. This gives certain tropical and desert plants a pollinator capable of traveling long distances between blooms under cover of night. Cacti, agaves, and some trees depend heavily on these nocturnal visitors. It is a magnificent image once you picture it properly. Through warm darkness, a bat moves from flower to flower with a pale dusting on its face, helping shape seeds and fruits while most of the world is asleep. Hummingbirds can wear pollen on their heads like tiny crowns. A hummingbird entering a flower is all speed, precision, and blur, yet the contact it makes can leave a visible trace. As the bird reaches in for nectar, the top of the head, the bill, or the face may brush the flower's reproductive structures. By the time it backs out, it can be carrying a bright dusting that looks almost ornamental. In some species, that placement is no accident. The flower is built so the bird must touch exactly the right spot on entry or exit. Then, at the next bloom, that same spot lines up with the receiving surface. It is a beautiful example of repeated fit between plant and pollinator. The bird appears jeweled for a moment, wearing a crown it never asked for, and will quickly lose to another flower. Yet in that fleeting decoration lies the mechanism of reproduction. A flash of color hovers, feeds, and departs, carrying the future of the plant on its feathers. Lemurs have been caught carrying pollen on their fur. When most people imagine pollinators, they think of insects first and birds second. A primate seems almost too strange for the role, yet in Madagascar, some lemurs visit large flowers for nectar and can end up carrying reproductive grains in their facial fur. As they push noses and muzzles into blossoms, the material catches in the coat and is then transported to the next flower visited. It is one of those facts that instantly widens the imagination. Pollination is not limited to the obvious winged specialists. Under the right ecological conditions, mammals with curious faces and climbing hands can become part of the same ancient story. These interactions are especially fascinating because they unfold in ecosystems already famous for unusual evolution. A tree opens its flowers, a lemur investigates for food, and the fur becomes a transport surface. The result feels almost improbable, but it is real. Even primates can become moving parts in the reproductive machinery of plants. Even lizards can pollinate flowers on certain islands. Island ecosystems often produce surprising arrangements because the usual cast of pollinators may be missing, rare, or unreliable. Under those conditions, other animals can step into roles that seem unexpected elsewhere. Some lizards visit flowers to feed on nectar or associated insects, and while doing so they brush against the reproductive parts and transfer grains between blooms. On islands in particular, where ecological relationships can become unusually flexible, these reptiles can make a meaningful contribution to plant reproduction. The image alone is unforgettable. A sun-warmed lizard pauses at a flower not as a threat or a bystander, but as a participant in the plant's future. Its scales, snout, or head can carry traces from one blossom to the next. This reminds us that pollination is less about identity and more about contact, movement, and repeated visits. When the conditions are right, almost any animal that feeds in flowers can become part of the story, even one we usually associate with rocks and sunshine. Water can carry pollen in a few unusual plant species. Most people think of transfer happening through air or on the bodies of animals, so the idea of water doing the job feels almost strange enough to be impossible. Yet a small number of plants have solved reproduction this way. In these species, the grains are released into currents, surface films, or shallow water where they drift toward the female structures of another plant. It is an elegant answer to a difficult problem. If your world is watery, then wind can become unreliable and insects may not be the best option. So evolution finds another route. The result is a form of pollination that feels older, quieter, and somehow more mysterious than the better-known methods on land. Instead of buzzing wings or gusts across a field, the medium is a moving sheet of water carrying life from one plant to another. It reminds us that reproduction in plants is not tied to one formula. Even the surface of water can become a pathway for beginnings. Seagrasses release pollen underwater, in a very rare strategy. Seagrasses are among the few flowering plants that return to the sea after their ancestors had already adapted to life on land. That alone is remarkable, but their reproductive method may be even stranger. These marine plants release their grains directly into seawater, where currents carry them through a submerged world of swaying leaves and shifting light. There are no bees, no breezes moving between petals, and no dry surfaces waiting above the tide. Everything happens below the waves. This is incredibly rare among flowering plants because most rely on air or animals. Seagrasses had to rework the entire process for life in salt water, and they succeeded. Vast underwater meadows now reproduce in a way that seems almost hidden from human imagination. Fish pass through. Turtles graze. Sunlight ripples above. And in that moving green world, microscopic packets drift through the sea itself, linking one plant to another in one of the quietest reproductive systems on Earth. Underwater pollen does not need the same shape as airborne pollen. Once a plant gives up life in open air and sends its reproductive material through water instead, the design rules change completely. A grain meant for the wind often needs to stay light, dry, and easily lifted. One meant for underwater travel faces a different world. Drag, buoyancy, flow, and contact behave differently there, so the structure can become elongated, thread-like, or otherwise modified for movement in liquid rather than air. In some marine species, the grains look so unusual that they barely resemble the classic forms people imagine under a microscope. This is one of the most beautiful examples of evolution tailoring shape to medium. The environment does not just determine where plants live. It reaches into the architecture of their tiniest reproductive parts. A change in habitat reshapes the grain itself. That means the sea has left its mark not only on leaves and roots, but on the invisible forms plants use to pass life onward. Ragweed pollen causes misery even though its flowers look insignificant. Some of the most troublesome plants are not dramatic at all. Ragweed does not lure the eye with big petals or lush blossoms. Its flowers are small, plain, and easy to ignore, which makes its impact feel almost unfair. The reason it causes such widespread misery is not visual beauty, but sheer reproductive output combined with the properties of its grains. It produces enormous quantities that travel easily through the air, and for many people, even a small exposure can trigger a fierce immune response. Sneezing, itchy eyes, congestion, and fatigue can all follow from something that most people would walk past without a second glance. That contrast is what makes it so memorable. A humble weed at the edge of a field can affect millions of lives. It is a reminder that the most powerful plants are not always the ones we admire. Sometimes the quietest-looking flowers are the ones that command the atmosphere. Bright petals often matter less to pollen than timing does. We are drawn to flowers with our eyes, so it is natural to assume that color must be the main thing that matters. But from the plant's point of view, timing can be even more important than appearance. A blossom may be perfectly beautiful, yet if it opens too early, too late, or when the right pollinators are absent, the whole effort can fail. Successful reproduction often depends on hitting a narrow window when the flower is receptive, the grains are viable, the weather is favorable, and the right carrier is active. That means a plain flower with impeccable timing may succeed better than a spectacular one at the wrong moment. This changes how you see a blooming landscape. It is not just a display. It is a schedule. Morning, afternoon, dusk, and season all matter. Hidden behind the color is a clockwork system. The true drama is not always in what we see, but in when everything happens. Plants can release pollen at specific hours of day. A field or garden may seem unchanged from one hour to the next, yet many plants operate on a schedule so precise that their reproductive activity rises and falls with the clock. Some release their grains in the morning when air is dry and pollinators are beginning to move. Others wait until later, matching the routines of particular insects or avoiding conditions that would reduce success. This means a flower is not simply open or closed. It can be tuned to a daily rhythm, with the most important moment arriving in a surprisingly narrow span of time. The reasons vary. Temperature changes through the day. Humidity shifts. Wind patterns rise and fall. Pollinators have their own timetables. The plant must fit its opportunity into that living schedule. Once you know this, a meadow feels different. The same landscape at dawn, noon, and evening is not quite the same reproductive world. The timing of release turns the day itself into part of the plant's strategy. Temperature can change exactly when flowers open and shed pollen. A small rise or fall in warmth can act like a signal that tells a flower whether the moment is right. In many species, opening is not fixed to an absolute hour. It responds to conditions, and temperature is one of the most important of them. Warm enough, and the floral parts loosen, unfold, or dehisce, allowing the grains to be released. Too cool, and the process may slow, stall, or shift to another time. This gives plants a way to match their reproductive effort to the surrounding environment, rather than blindly following a rigid schedule. It also means that a cold morning can delay events that a warm morning would trigger quickly. The flower is not merely decorative tissue. It is a sensitive structure responding to the physical world around it. That sensitivity makes plant reproduction feel less passive than people imagine. Blossoms are not just waiting in the weather. They are reading it and acting accordingly. Humidity can make pollen clump burst, or travel badly. Moisture in the air can transform the behavior of a grain in ways that matter enormously for reproduction. Under dry conditions, many types stay loose and mobile, ready to be carried through air or handled cleanly by the structures that receive them. But when humidity rises, things can change fast. Some grains absorb water and become heavier or stickier. Others clump together so they no longer disperse well. In certain cases, exposure to too much moisture can even make them rupture, spilling contents before they ever reach the right target. That gives the atmosphere an almost gatekeeping role. It is not only moving material around, it is deciding how well that material behaves during the journey. For people, humidity is just a feeling in the air. For plants, it can alter the entire reproductive odds of the day. A muggy morning and a crisp one may look similar in a field, yet they can mean very different fates for millions of grains. Rain can clear pollen from air, then trigger more later. A rain shower can feel like relief, especially during the height of allergy season, because falling water scrubs the air and knocks suspended material down onto surfaces below. For a while, the atmosphere can become noticeably cleaner, but the story does not always end there. Once the rain passes, plants may resume release, and changing conditions afterward can sometimes set the stage for a fresh wave. Moist soil, recovering warmth, and returning wind can all contribute to what happens next. In some cases, the contrast is striking. One moment the air feels washed and quiet. A little later, the cycle begins again. This gives weather a rhythm that people often sense without fully understanding. Rain is not simply an on or off switch for pollen in the environment. It is part of a sequence, clearing, resetting, and then allowing the next phase to unfold. The sky becomes part of the schedule by which landscapes shed their reproductive dust. Dry, windy days can turn fields into pollen launch sites. There are days when a field stops feeling like a passive stretch of plants and starts behaving like an active source, releasing invisible material into the moving air with astonishing efficiency. Dryness helps many grains separate cleanly from the structures holding them. Wind then does the rest, lifting, sweeping, and spreading them across the landscape. Under those conditions, open grasslands, cereal crops, and weedy margins can become immense launch platforms, each stem contributing to a much larger atmospheric event. Sometimes the effect is visible as a faint haze. Often it is not. Yet the movement is happening all the same, turning ordinary land into a biological emitter on a huge scale. This is one reason certain weather patterns feel so different to sensitive people. The landscape itself has become more active. A calm, damp day keeps things close. A dry, breezy one lets the field give itself to the sky, grain by grain, across wide distances. Cities can trap and concentrate pollen in unexpected ways. People often imagine the countryside as the main stage for pollen, yet cities can create their own strange versions of exposure. Streets lined with planted trees, sheltered courtyards, narrow lanes, and rows of tall buildings can alter airflow so that grains linger, swirl, or collect where people least expect them. Heat rising from pavement changes local air movement. Dry surfaces prevent moisture from knocking particles down. Park plantings, roadside grasses, and ornamental trees all add to the mix. Even a place that looks mostly stone and glass can become a patchwork of miniature pollen zones. One square may feel fine, while the next catches air from a row of trees and suddenly feels much heavier. That is part of what makes urban pollen so surprising. It does not simply arrive from elsewhere. The built environment can shape where it gathers and how long it stays. A city can become a machine for redistributing invisible botanical material block by block. Air pollution can make some pollen more irritating to humans. The grain itself is only part of the story. Once it moves through polluted air, the encounter with the human body can become harsher. Ozone, nitrogen oxides, diesel exhaust, and fine particles can stress plants and alter the chemistry of what they release. At the same time, those pollutants can irritate the nose, eyes, throat, and lungs, making tissues more reactive when the grains arrive. In some cases, pollution can even damage the outer surface, helping allergenic proteins escape more easily. The result is not always more pollen in the air, but a more troublesome version of the experience for the people breathing it. That is what makes this so unsettling. The atmosphere becomes a partnership between biology and traffic, between flowering seasons and combustion. A spring day may look bright and ordinary, yet the air can contain a more aggressive mix than the landscape alone would have produced. Modern cities change the botanical experience of breathing. Warmer seasons are extending pollen release in many places. One of the clearest changes people notice is not just intensity, but duration. In many regions, warmer conditions are lengthening the parts of the year when plants can grow, flower, and release their reproductive grains. Spring can begin earlier. Frost may arrive later. That stretches the active season and gives some species more time to produce. Trees may start ahead of their old schedule. Grasses and weeds can keep going deeper into the year than they once did. For people sensitive to airborne pollen, this can make the season feel less like a sharp burst and more like a long campaign. For the plants, it means the calendar itself is shifting. What was once a narrow window becomes a wider opportunity. This is one reason the subject now feels tied to larger environmental change. You are not only looking at flowers and fields anymore. You are looking at climate written into the timing and length of a microscopic seasonal event. Climate change is altering pollen calendars across whole regions. For generations, flowering followed patterns people could roughly anticipate. Certain trees came first, then grasses, then late-season weeds. Those sequences still exist, but the dates are no longer as stable as they once seemed. As climates warm and local weather patterns change, the calendar of release can shift across large areas. Some species begin earlier. Some continue longer. Some overlap in ways that used to be less common. That means entire regions can experience a reshaped seasonal rhythm, with consequences for ecosystems, agriculture, and human health. The remarkable thing is that these changes can be traced not just in landscapes, but in timing itself. The old botanical clock is being reset in stages. A place may still have the same trees, the same weeds, the same grasses, yet the schedule by which they release their grains has begun to drift. It is one of the clearest ways climate change enters everyday life, through the invisible timing of the air. More carbon dioxide can help some plants produce more pollen. Carbon dioxide is one of the raw materials plants use to build themselves, so when its levels rise, some species respond with stronger growth and greater reproductive output. Not all plants react in the same way, but for certain highly allergenic species, the result can be more vigorous flowering and more grains released into the environment. Ragweed is one of the most discussed examples, because increased carbon dioxide has been linked to greater production under the right conditions. That gives this topic an unsettling twist. A gas we usually talk about in terms of climate and temperature also reaches directly into the biology of individual plants. It can change how much reproductive material they make. The air influences the plant, then the plant changes the air again through what it releases. There is something almost circular about that. Atmosphere and landscape are not separate systems. They are interacting continuously, and the result can be a much more productive pollen season. Allergy seasons can now begin earlier and last longer. For many people, the old rhythm used to feel more predictable. Symptoms arrived in a certain stretch of spring or summer, peaked, then faded. In many places, that pattern is loosening. Some seasons now start earlier in the year and continue later, creating a longer period of exposure that can feel exhausting even when daily levels are not always extreme. Trees may begin before people are ready for them. Grasses can hold on through warm weather. Weeds may keep the cycle going into autumn. The result is not simply more inconvenience. It changes how people experience the year itself. A season once associated with fresh air and bloom can become something watched with caution, tracked week by week. What makes this especially striking is that the cause lies in shifting plant schedules, not in anything obvious to the eye. The world may look beautiful and familiar, while the calendar of discomfort quietly stretches behind the scenes. Pollen counts are measured to warn millions of allergy sufferers. Because the grains are invisible at ordinary scale, people cannot rely on sight alone to know what the air is carrying. That is why monitoring exists. Sampling stations collect airborne particles, technicians identify and count the types present, and forecasts turn those findings into warnings people can use. Behind a simple report like low, moderate, or high lies painstaking work with traps, slides, microscopes, and local knowledge of which plants are active at that time. In effect, scientists are reading the atmosphere like a seasonal text and translating it into something practical. For many people, those counts shape daily decisions. When to open windows, when to exercise outdoors, when to travel, when to prepare medication. It is fascinating that something so tiny has generated its own public information system. We forecast rain, wind, and temperature, and now we also forecast botanical load. The air is no longer just weather. It is a measured ecological condition. Not all airborne pollen causes allergies, despite common belief. It is easy to blame every visible yellow dusting or every spring flower, but the truth is more selective. Many grains move through the air without provoking major allergic reactions in most people. What matters is not just that a plant releases pollen, but the biology of the grain itself, how much is present, how easily it is inhaled, and whether the immune system recognizes its proteins as threatening. Some heavy or sticky grains are less likely to drift far into the breathing zone. Others may be abundant but relatively unimportant for allergy. This is why public perception often gets it wrong. A dramatic coating on a car may look guilty, while a far less noticeable source is doing more actual harm. The atmosphere is full of different plant particles, but only some become major human irritants. That distinction matters because it turns the subject from vague suspicion into real natural history. The identity of the plant changes the entire meaning of the air. Most showy flowers cause less hay fever than grasses do. This surprises people because bright blossoms look like the obvious suspects. They are colorful, noticeable, and associated with spring. Yet many of the flowers humans admire most rely on insects, not wind, to move their pollen. That usually means their grains are heavier, stickier, and less likely to become widely airborne in large numbers. Grasses are different. Their flowers are often plain, easy to overlook, and built for release into open air. They do not need beauty to attract pollinators, so they can invest instead in producing clouds of lightweight pollen that travel efficiently and reach human noses with unfortunate success. That reversal changes how you see a summer field. The trouble may not come from roses in the garden or the bold blossom by the fence, but from the anonymous green abundance stretching across verges, lawns, and meadows. The plainest flowers in the landscape can have the greatest influence on the atmosphere you breathe. The worst allergy pollen often comes from overlooked plants. The biggest offenders are frequently not the plants people photograph, plant for beauty, or notice on the walk. They are the weeds by roadsides, the grasses in unmanaged corners, the trees no one thinks about until they begin to shed, the species whose flowers are so modest they barely register. These plants succeed by numbers, timing, and airborne reach rather than spectacle. Because they do not depend on attracting people or insects with dramatic petals, they can remain almost anonymous while releasing extraordinary amounts into the atmosphere. That anonymity is part of their power. A person may know every rose in a garden and still have no idea which weed near the car park is driving their symptoms. It is a lesson in how nature works beyond human attention. The atmosphere is shaped not by what we find prettiest, but by what plants are built to do. Sometimes the most influential species are the ones we barely see at all. One tiny grain can trigger a powerful immune overreaction. For most people, a grain is only part of the background of spring or summer, floating past without consequence. But in a allergic person, that same microscopic object can set off a surprisingly dramatic chain of events. When it lands in the nose or eyes, the immune system mistakes certain proteins on its surface for a dangerous threat. Cells release histamine and other chemicals, blood vessels widen, tissues swell, mucus increases, and nerves become more sensitive. The result can feel wildly out of proportion to the size of the trigger. A particle too small to see clearly can produce streaming eyes, relentless sneezing, itching, pressure, and exhaustion. What makes this so fascinating is the mismatch of scale. The grain is not attacking. It is simply present. Yet the body responds as though something serious has arrived. In that sense, allergy is one of the strangest meetings between plants and humans, where a harmless grain can provoke a storm. Thunderstorms can break pollen apart into especially troublesome fragments. A thunderstorm does more than darken the sky and stir the wind. It can also change the physical state of pollen in the air. Before the rain fully settles the atmosphere, strong gusts may lift grains and concentrate them near ground level. Then moisture enters the picture. Some grains absorb water rapidly and rupture, breaking into much smaller fragments that still carry allergenic material. These fragments are far tinier than the original grains and can spread through storm outflows in dense bursts. That matters because the smaller pieces are easier to inhale deeply into the lungs. So a storm can transform the air not just by moving pollen around, but by changing its form into something more penetrating. It is one of the most unsettling examples of weather interacting with biology in real time. The sky flashes, the wind rises, and suddenly the atmosphere contains a broken botanical dust, far more troublesome than what was floating there before. That is why stormy days can worsen asthma attacks. When thunderstorms shatter pollen into smaller fragments, the danger shifts from the nose and eyes toward the lungs. Larger grains often get trapped earlier in the airways, but tiny storm-broken particles can travel much deeper. For people with asthma, that can mean tighter chests, wheezing, coughing, and sudden breathing difficulty. In some severe events, hospitals have seen waves of patients arriving within hours of a storm, all struggling at once. The weather itself is not the whole cause. It is the combination of wind, moisture, fragmented allergenic material, and vulnerable lungs meeting at the same moment. That makes these episodes especially alarming, because a day that begins with heat and ordinary pollen can end in a medical emergency once the storm front passes through. It is a powerful reminder that the atmosphere is not only weather in the human sense, it is also a medium full of biological particles, and storms can rearrange that medium with frightening speed. Some pollen grains are smaller than the width of hair. Human hair feels thin enough already, yet many grains are far smaller than that. A single strand of hair can be several times wider than some of the particles plants release into the air, which helps explain why they move so easily without drawing attention. They can pass through sunbeams, settle on skin, and ride currents through open windows, while remaining entirely invisible to ordinary sight. This tiny scale also changes how we imagine plants. A tree may be huge, but part of its reproductive strategy depends on structures so small that thousands could fit across the width of a fingertip. There is something deeply compelling about that contrast. Vast organisms, towering over roads and roofs, trust their future to particles barely larger than dust. It is a reminder that scale in nature is rarely simple. The largest living forms often depend on the smallest moving parts, and some of the biggest seasonal events on Earth are carried by particles narrower than a human hair. Others are large enough to look startling under magnification. Once magnified, some grains seem almost shockingly substantial. Instead of appearing like vague dust, they loom into view as bold structures with visible openings, sculpted walls, and dramatic outlines. Certain species produce grains large enough that under the microscope they feel less like particles and more like objects, almost as though a miniature artifact has been placed on the slide. Their size allows surface textures and architectural details to stand out with surprising force. Ridges become landscapes. Pores look deliberate. Spines feel imposing. This can completely change a person's emotional response to the subject. What sounded microscopic and abstract suddenly becomes vivid and memorable. A grain can look formidable, ornate, even slightly alien. That is one reason pollen captivates so many people once they see it properly. Magnification does not merely reveal the unseen. It reveals that the unseen can be visually dramatic. Some grains do not just survive enlargement. They seem built to astonish under it. Microscopes turned pollen into a whole scientific universe of forms. Before magnification, it was easy to think of pollen as a generic powder, one yellow dust much like another. The microscope shattered that illusion. Suddenly, scientists could see that each grain had shape, openings, texture, symmetry, and structure of its own. A hidden world appeared, full of geometric variety and unexpected elegance. What had seemed uniform turned out to be astonishingly diverse, and that discovery opened an entire field of study. Researchers could compare species, trace plant relationships, identify ancient sediments, and begin classifying grains by the fine details of their form. It is hard to overstate what a shift this was. The microscope did not simply enlarge the subject. It transformed it from nuisance or curiosity into a rich scientific landscape. A smear on a slide became a universe of patterns. That is one of the great gifts of magnification in science. It reveals that ordinary things are often only ordinary until we learn how to see them. Early scientists drew pollen like jewels, stars, and cages. Long before digital imaging made microscopic detail easy to capture, researchers had to look, remember, and draw. Their illustrations of pollen are some of the most beautiful records in early botany because they combined scientific care with real visual wonder. Faced with forms they had never imagined, artists and naturalists rendered them as spheres ringed with openings, spiky globes, latticed shells, and radiant shapes that resembled stars, crowns, lanterns, or tiny cages. The comparison to jewelry comes naturally because many looked crafted rather than grown. These drawings were not just decoration. They helped communicate structure at a time when microscopy was still changing how people understood the natural world. In a sense, those early scientists were ambassadors between hidden nature and human imagination. They took what no unaided eye could see and turned it into images others could study. Their work reminds us that wonder and precision have often grown together in the history of science. Pollen morphology became one of botany's most intricate arts. Once scientists realized how much information was locked into shape and surface detail, describing pollen became a discipline of extraordinary precision. Morphology in this context means the study of form, and here form includes everything from symmetry and size to the number of apertures and the fine ornament of the outer wall. Specialists learned to distinguish reticulate surfaces from striate ones, to note whether grains were spherical, elongated, triangular, or more complex, and to read these details as clues to identity and relationship. The work is exacting, but it also has an almost artistic side. To become skilled in it, you must learn to see subtle structure, the way a connoisseur learns to see brushwork. That is why the field feels so intricate. It sits at the border of measurement and visual sensibility. A trained observer can look at a grain and notice a whole vocabulary of traits that others would miss completely. It turns microscopic observation into a practiced art of attention. Different species can be identified from pollen alone. This is one of the facts that makes pollen feel almost magical in scientific hands. A grain separated from the flower, the leaf, the stem, and the whole visible plant can still carry enough information to reveal where it came from. By studying its size, shape, wall pattern, and openings, specialists can often identify the parent plant to genus, and sometimes even to species. That means a single grain can act like a botanical signature detached from the plant itself. It is this quality that gives pollen such power in archaeology, ecology, geology, and forensic work. A fragmentary landscape can be read through what survives in sediments. A honey sample can reveal floral origins. A soil trace can hint at habitat. All of that becomes possible because the grain retains identity at microscopic scale. In a world where so much evidence decays, it is astonishing that a plant can stamp its signature onto something so small and send it out into the world. Even close relatives often make distinctly patterned pollen shells. Plants that seem similar to us can still produce grains with surprisingly different outer patterns. Two close relatives may share leaf shape, growth form, and even similar flowers. Yet under magnification, their pollen walls can reveal distinct arrangements of ridges, spines, nets, or pores. This matters because it shows how much information evolution can preserve at microscopic scale. Relationships remain visible, but individuality does too. The shell becomes a place where lineage and species identity are both written into form. For scientists, those subtle differences can help separate plants that would otherwise be difficult to tell apart in ancient sediments or mixed samples. For everyone else, it is simply a wonderful idea. Close relatives, almost like botanical siblings, can still have their own microscopic signatures. The more you learn about pollen, the harder it becomes to call it simple dust. Even among near kin, each grain can carry pattern, character, and identity in a shell too small for ordinary sight. Pollen helped flowering plants conquer nearly every land habitat. Flowering plants did not become globally dominant by accident. One of their great advantages was the ability to move reproductive material efficiently across wildly different landscapes. With pollen, they could reproduce in dense forests, open grasslands, mountain slopes, deserts, wetlands, and disturbed ground where older strategies were less effective. Some species handed the job to insects, others to birds, bats, or wind, and each method opened a different ecological door. That flexibility helped flowering plants spread into an astonishing range of habitats and then diversify within them. Once established, they reshaped food webs, soils, and even the look of the continents. Meadows brightened, forests changed character, and whole animal lineages evolved alongside them. It is difficult to overstate the scale of that success. What seems like a tiny reproductive grain helped power one of the greatest expansions in the history of life. Much of the green world we recognize today was built through that microscopic advantage. It freed plant reproduction from depending entirely on water. Earlier land plants still carried an old dependency from their watery ancestry. In many of them, the male cells needed a film of water to reach the female structures, which tied successful reproduction to damp conditions. Pollen changed that completely. Instead of requiring open water for the final approach, seed plants could package the male side into a protected grain and send it through air or on the bodies of animals. That freed reproduction from waiting on rain, mist, or saturated ground in the same direct way. Suddenly, drier habitats became far more accessible. Plants could spread into places where liquid water might be scarce at exactly the wrong moment, yet reproduction could still succeed. This was not a minor improvement. It was a profound shift in what was possible on land. In evolutionary terms, it meant that reproduction no longer had to remain chained to water in the old way. A microscopic innovation opened the door to vast new botanical territory. That evolutionary shift changed the history of life on land. Once plants could reproduce more independently of free water, the consequences reached far beyond botany. New kinds of vegetation spread across landscapes, creating more stable food sources, more varied shelter, and new opportunities for animals that fed, nested, climbed, hid, or hunted among them. Seeds and fruits became portable packets of nutrition. Forests changed in composition. Open habitats filled with flowering plants and grasses altered how herbivores lived and how predators followed them. Even insects evolved in response, forming intricate relationships with flowers that would help drive pollination and diversification on both sides. In other words, the rise of pollen-based reproduction did not simply improve one plant process. It helped rearrange land ecosystems at a planetary scale. Whole communities became possible because plants had a better way to begin the next generation. When you trace that change outward, it touches forests, food webs, animals, and eventually human agriculture. A tiny grain helped rewrite terrestrial history. Dinosaurs once walked through air filled with ancient pollen. It is easy to picture dinosaurs among ferns, conifers, and towering cycads, but the air around them was not empty. It carried microscopic reproductive grains from the plants of their world, just as modern air does today. During the age of dinosaurs, gymnosperms were already releasing pollen, and later, early flowering plants joined the story. That means vast herds, stalking predators, and feathered small dinosaurs all lived in landscapes where seasonal clouds of airborne pollen drifted through forests, floodplains, and coastal plains. Some of those grains settled into sediments and survived, which is why scientists can now use fossil pollen to help reconstruct dinosaur-era environments. In a sense, the atmospheric backdrop of the Mesozoic still exists in fragments, preserved in rock as botanical evidence. That is a wonderful image to hold on to. Long before humans sneezed in spring, the ancient world already had pollen seasons, and dinosaurs moved through them beneath very different skies. Some of the first flowering plants spread with insect-borne pollen. When flowering plants first began to diversify, they entered a world already full of insects. That created a powerful opportunity. Instead of relying only on chance movement through air, early flowers could use insects as directed transport. Grains placed on a visiting body had a far better chance of reaching another flower of the same kind. This allowed early flowering plants to become more targeted, more efficient, and in many cases, more evolutionarily adventurous. Shapes, scents, rewards, and structures could all begin changing in response to insect behavior. At the same time, insects gained new food sources and new ecological roles. The relationship was not static. It became an arms race, a partnership, and a creative engine all at once. Some of the earliest angiosperms likely spread through exactly that kind of interaction. So the rise of flowering plants was not a solo performance. It was helped along by insects carrying pollen from bloom to bloom in a deep evolutionary collaboration. Pollen helped create fruits, nuts, and seeds for animals. Before an apple sweetens, before an acorn hardens, before a sunflower seed fills out, successful pollination has to happen. That means a remarkable share of the food animals depend on begins with the movement of pollen. Once fertilization succeeds, plants can form seeds and the surrounding tissues that become fruits or other edible structures. Those products then feed birds, mammals, insects, and countless other creatures. Forests full of nuts, hedgerows full of berries, fields full of grain, and trees bending with fruit all trace back to that earlier invisible stage. This is one reason pollen matters far beyond reproduction alone. It helps generate entire food systems. Animals disperse seeds, return nutrients, and shape plant communities in turn. But the process often starts with successful transfer at the flower or cone. A world rich in seeds and fruit is, in part, a world where pollen did its job well. Tiny grains help build abundance on a grand scale. Much of human agriculture depends on successful pollen transfer. Modern farming can look mechanical, with tractors, irrigation lines, drones, packing sheds, and global supply chains. Yet beneath all that technology lies an ancient biological requirement. Many crops still need pollen to move successfully before the harvest can exist at all. Fruits, nuts, oilseeds, many vegetables, and some fiber crops all begin with this stage. If conditions are poor, if pollinators are missing, or if timing fails, yields can fall long before any visible produce appears. That makes agriculture more biologically delicate than it sometimes seems. A supermarket may feel far removed from flowering fields, but the connection is immediate. Behind shelves of apples, almonds, melons, squash, berries, and many other foods lies a moment when transfer had to work. It is one of the great hidden truths of civilization. Human agriculture did not escape plant reproduction. It scaled it up. Vast economies now depend on microscopic grains reaching the right place at the right time. Apples need pollen movement before orchards can set fruit. An apple orchard in blossom looks serene, almost decorative, but it is standing at one of the most critical moments of the year. For fruit to develop well, pollen usually needs to move between compatible varieties, because many apple trees do not set their best crops from their own pollen alone. That is why orchards often include pollinizer trees placed carefully among the main crop. Bees then do the linking work, moving between blossoms and carrying what each tree needs from its neighbor. Without that exchange, flowers may open beautifully and still fail to produce a strong harvest. This gives the orchard a hidden complexity. It is not just rows of identical trees. It is a planned reproductive system with timing, compatibility, and insect traffic built into the design. When blossom season arrives, the entire future crop depends on those connections happening flower by flower. Months later, the apples hanging on the branches are the visible result of that invisible spring movement. Almond harvests begin with an enormous annual movement of bees. Few agricultural events show the scale of pollination more dramatically than almond bloom. Almond trees flower early, often when the landscape is still only beginning to wake, and they require insect pollination to produce a strong crop. Because of that, vast numbers of managed honeybee colonies are transported into almond-growing regions each year. The sight is extraordinary. Hives arrive by truck, orchard after orchard fills with bees, and a major farming industry begins with the movement of living pollinators rather than machinery alone. For a brief period, the trees are covered in pale blossoms, and the orchards hum with activity. Every nut that will later be shelled, roasted, bottled into milk, or turned into paste depends on success during this short season. It is a reminder that industrial agriculture still leans on ecological relationships at astonishing scale. One of the largest organized movements in farming is not of fruit or grain, but of bees, brought in to move pollen. Vanilla flowers must be pollinated with extraordinary care and timing. Vanilla feels like something simple once it reaches us, a familiar flavor in ice cream, cakes, and perfume, yet the flower behind it is famously demanding. In commercial production outside its native pollination range, each bloom often has to be pollinated by hand, and the window is short. A flower may open for just a single day, which means workers must find it at the right moment and transfer pollen with delicate precision before that chance is gone. The structure of the flower makes this even more exacting, because a membrane separates the pollen from the receptive surface and must be lifted or bypassed during the process. Done properly, the flower can form the long pod that will later be cured into vanilla. Miss the moment, and nothing develops. That gives vanilla an almost astonishing origin story. One of the world's best-loved flavors often begins with a human hand performing careful pollination during a narrow and easily lost window. Cacao trees need tiny midges to move their pollen. Chocolate begins in a surprisingly delicate way. The cacao tree does not rely on large bees or bright, obvious blossoms. Its flowers are tiny, intricate, and easy to overlook, and the creatures that often move their pollen are even smaller. They are biting midges, little flies that thrive in damp, shaded tropical conditions among leaf litter and humid understory air. When they visit the flowers, they can brush against the reproductive parts and carry the grains onward. This gives cacao a strangely intimate dependency. One of the world's most beloved flavors begins with insects so small that many people would never notice them at all. It also means the health of cacao production is tied to the surrounding habitat in a deeper way than plantations alone can show. Moist ground, decaying organic matter, shade, and tiny insects all become part of the story. Behind every chocolate bar is a flower that needed a minute forest fly to do its work. Without pollen, chocolate would never begin its long journey. It is easy to think of chocolate as something industrial, roasted, ground, tempered, wrapped, and shipped. But before any of that can happen, the cacao flower has to be pollinated successfully. Only then can the pod begin to swell on the trunk or older branches of the tree. Inside that pod, the seeds develop, and those seeds are what we eventually know as cocoa beans after harvest and processing. No pollination, no pod. No pod, no beans. No beans, no chocolate at all. That chain makes the entire global chocolate industry feel much more fragile and much more beautiful. A luxury product that travels across oceans and fills shop shelves begins with a microscopic event in a tropical flower. The journey from rainforest shade to dessert plate starts long before fermentation and roasting. It starts with successful pollen transfer, hidden inside a small flower that most people will never see, yet whose success flavors the world. Some plants launch pollen with explosive force from spring-loaded flowers. Not every flower waits passively for a visitor to brush against it. Some are built with tension already loaded into their structures, almost like biological catapults. When the right insect lands, pushes, or probes, that tension is released and the pollen is fired outward in a sudden burst. In certain mountain laurels, for example, the stamens are bent and tucked into little pockets. A visiting insect disturbs them, and they snap free, flinging pollen with surprising speed onto the animal's body. It is one of the most dramatic moments in plant reproduction because the flower behaves less like a bowl and more like a mechanism. What seemed still and ornamental was actually armed with stored energy. This makes pollination feel active in a completely different way. The plant is not just offering reward and hoping for contact. It is seizing the moment and delivering its cargo with force, turning a flower visit into a spring-loaded event. Others hide pollen inside traps that open only once. Some flowers treat pollination like a carefully staged performance with a single critical reveal. Instead of exposing their pollen immediately, they keep it concealed inside structures that only open after the visitor has already been lured, delayed, or guided into the right position. In a few cases, a flower may temporarily trap an insect inside, hold it while the reproductive parts mature, and then release it, dusted with pollen when the timing is right. The trap is not cruelty. It is choreography. The insect comes for scent, warmth, food, or deception, and the flower controls the order of events. When the chamber finally opens, the visitor leaves as a courier, whether it intended to or not. This makes the flower feel almost theatrical, with doors, delays, and a single well-timed exit. Reproduction becomes an event with staging and release. The pollen is not merely presented. It is withheld until the flower decides the moment is perfect. A few species change sex timing to manage pollen flow. Some flowers solve reproductive problems not by changing shape, but by changing schedule. Within a single bloom, the male and female phases may not be active at the same time. A flower can function first as male, releasing pollen, and only later become receptive as female. In other species, the order is reversed. This timing reduces the chance of self-pollination and encourages movement between different individuals. It is a subtle but brilliant strategy. The flower does not need to reject its own pollen chemically if it has already arranged the timing so that selfing becomes less likely in the first place. For pollinators, the blossom may look much the same from one day to the next, yet its role has shifted completely. Inside, the schedule has changed. That makes the flower feel less like a static object and more like a participant following a script. Reproductive timing becomes a tool, and the plant uses time itself to direct the flow of pollen. Some flowers present pollen in stages to ration it carefully. To human eyes, a flower may look fully open and entirely available, but some species do not release all their pollen at once. Instead, they dispense it gradually over several visits or across several phases. This can be a clever strategy when pollinators are frequent but unreliable. If all the pollen were offered in one go, a single visitor might take too much, waste too much, or carry it inefficiently. By rationing the supply, the flower spreads its chances across multiple encounters. Each visit takes a little, leaving more for the next. This is a subtle form of reproductive management, almost like budgeting. The plant is controlling not just whether pollen moves, but how much moves at a time. That gives flowers a level of strategic refinement people rarely imagine. What seems like a simple bloom can be metering out its reproductive material with precision, trying to make the most of every visit in a world where nothing is guaranteed. Pollen can even help scientists map the diets of bees. When researchers want to know what bees are really feeding on, they do not always have to follow every foraging trip through fields and gardens. Instead, they can examine the pollen the bees bring back or leave behind in nests, honey, and stored food. Because different plant species produce distinctive grains, those samples can reveal which flowers the bees have been visiting and in what proportions. This turns the pollen into a dietary record. Scientists can discover whether a colony depends mostly on crop plants, roadside weeds, wildflowers, shrubs, trees, or a seasonal mixture of all of them. That knowledge matters because it shows which landscapes truly nourish bees and which only appear rich at a glance. A patch of flowers may look generous, but the pollen record tells the deeper truth. In that sense, bees become samplers of the landscape, and the grains they gather allow humans to read the menu of the world they have been feeding from. Future researchers may read today's pollen as history in mud. Right now, grains are settling into ponds, ditches, wetlands, reservoirs, and quiet lake bottoms all over the world. Most of them go unnoticed, but layer by layer, they are being stored as part of a future record. Centuries from now, scientists may study those sediments and reconstruct the landscapes of our era from what accumulated there. They may see the spread of certain crops, the planting of ornamental trees, the retreat of wild habitats, or the fingerprint of climate change on regional vegetation. In other words, the pollen we release into the world today is becoming tomorrow's historical evidence. That idea gives the present a strange kind of permanence. Our agriculture, our gardens, our land use, and our altered seasons are quietly being archived beneath shallow water and wet soil. The modern world feels fast and disposable, yet microscopic grains are already settling into place as durable witnesses. The mud below us is preparing to remember our botanical age. The dust on a windowsill can contain a map of flowering life. A windowsill seems ordinary, a place where dull indoor dust gathers and waits to be wiped away. Yet mixed into that fine layer can be grains from trees down the street, grasses in nearby verges, weeds in cracks of pavement, garden plants over the fence, and distant sources carried on the wind. In a small way, the sill becomes a collector of the local flowering world. Each open window, breeze, and season adds another trace. Most of it looks meaningless, but under a microscope, it can become a botanical snapshot of the surroundings. This is one of the most enchanting things about pollen. It turns familiar places into archives without asking permission. Even the settled dust inside a home can carry a record of what bloomed beyond the glass. The everyday world is constantly gathering evidence from the living landscape. A household surface can hold a miniature map of the plants sharing your patch of earth. Pollen looks humble, yet it quietly keeps the living world going. By the end of this journey, that may be the most astonishing truth of all. What seems like dust on a car, haze in spring air, or a nuisance on a windy day is also one of the great sustaining materials of life on land. It helps forests renew themselves, meadows fill with seed, crops bear food, orchards set fruit, and countless animals find nourishment in the results. It links flowers to bees, trees to time, ancient mud to modern science, and tiny grains to global ecosystems. Most of the time it works unnoticed. There are no grand announcements when a grain lands where it must. Yet again and again, that invisible success becomes the visible abundance of the world. That is why the subject feels so much bigger than it first appears. Pollen is not just a detail of plant life. It is one of the quiet systems holding terrestrial life together, grain by grain, season after season, year after year. Tonight, we wandered through a realm that can seem almost too small to matter, yet it holds together forests, orchards, meadows, wetlands, crops, honey, fruit, and the future of countless living things. We followed pollen through pine woods and wheat fields, across lakes, through storms, into ancient mud, onto the legs of bees, the faces of bats, and even into the history of lost landscapes. We saw that what looks like dust can become food, memory, evidence, architecture, and survival. We saw that entire harvests begin with it, that chocolate begins with it, that apples, almonds, vanilla, and forests all lean, in their own way, on these drifting grains. And perhaps by now, the world feels a little different, a little fuller, as though the air itself has become more alive. As though a flower is no longer just a flower, and a yellow haze in spring is no longer just dust, but part of an enormous hidden story unfolding all around you. So now, let all of that soften. Let the fields grow distant. Let the bees drift home. Let the pine pollen settle along still water. Let the flowers close one by one, and let the day loosen its hold on you. If you enjoyed this sleepy journey, you can like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps this channel find other curious minds who may need a calm place to land at the end of the day. And if you happen to still be awake, there will be another video waiting for you on screen in just a moment. But for now, there is nowhere to go and nothing to do. Just rest. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts become light and quiet, like pollen moving on the evening air. Sleep well and good night.